3 years of pouring drinks and pretending I didn't have a past was supposed to make me invisible. That was the deal with witness protection. The promise Agent Harris made when I was 19 and terrified, testifying against Victor Volkov while his eyes burned holes through my skull from across that Chicago courtroom. Disappear into somewhere warm and forgettable, he'd said. Build a boring life. Stay unremarkable. Miami seemed like the right kind of wrong place to hide. Tourist city, transient population, nobody asking questions about a bartender working night shifts at a place called the Velvet Lounge. The name was aspirational at best. Velvet implied luxury we absolutely did not possess. The upholstery was vinyl, the lighting was dim to hide water stains, and the clientele ranged from lonely businessmen to college students ordering craft cocktails they couldn't properly appreciate. But it was mine in the way a routine becomes yours. I knew which regulars tipped well, which ones got handsy after the third bourbon, how to defuse arguments before they escalated. I'd memorized exit routes, kept my phone charged, maintained exactly 3 emergency contacts that would ring through to Agent Harris or his backup. Except 3 weeks ago, those numbers stopped working properly. Agent Harris called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Unusual because he typically only reached out monthly. Turner, I'm being transferred. Different division, different cases. Someone new will make contact within 48 hours. Wait, what do you mean transferred? You've been my handler for 8 years. Protocol change, budget restructuring. You'll be fine. New contact will have the verification phrase. The line disconnected before I could ask more. Friday came and went. No new contact. I tried the emergency number Saturday morning and got disconnected tones, voicemail boxes that were full. By Sunday, I'd convinced myself it was typical federal inefficiency. Some paperwork delay. Harris had always complained about bureaucracy. Still, instinct hummed beneath my calm exterior. The same instinct that kept me alive at 19, when I'd seen Victor Volkov put a bullet through a man's skull in an alley behind a restaurant where I'd been taking out trash during my shift. I should have run then. Should have dropped the bag and sprinted back inside. Instead, I froze, and our eyes met across 15 feet of blood-spattered concrete. He'd smiled. Actually smiled, like we were sharing a private joke instead of a murder. 3 weeks without proper handler contact wasn't panic-worthy yet. 3 weeks plus the small wrongnesses accumulating around me. That was different. The black sedan that appeared on my street 2 nights in a row, parked in the same spot with no one getting in or out. The man in the grocery store who seemed to be shopping without buying anything, who I noticed in 3 different aisles before he left empty-handed. The sensation of being watched during my walk home Thursday night, strong enough that I'd circled 2 extra blocks and used the side entrance. I'd survived 8 years by trusting irrational fear. Friday night at the Velvet Lounge, Marco gathered the staff before opening. 6 of us crowded into the storage room that doubled as a break room. "I'm selling the place," he announced. "Family back in Athens needs me. Buyers taking over immediately. You'll all keep your jobs if you want them." Change meant visibility. New ownership meant new eyes, new questions, new opportunities for someone to notice the bartender who never talked about her past. "Who bought it?" I asked. "Investment group out of New York. Representatives coming tonight to introduce himself. Be professional, forgettable, exactly competent enough to keep the job, but not interesting enough to remember." That evening, Miami staged a dramatic performance. Thunder rolled in around 8, proper thunder that made the building shudder, followed by rain that turned streets into rivers. Half our usual Friday crowd never showed. By 9:30, we had maybe 15 people scattered across tables and bar stools. I was wiping down the bar when the door opened and he walked in. Tall, over 6 feet easily, dark hair swept back from his face. Charcoal suit that actually fit properly, tailored to shoulders that suggested he spent time doing something physical. He scanned the room with precise attention, cataloging exits and occupants before his eyes landed on me. The assessment lasted 3 seconds, long enough that I felt pinned beneath the weight of his focus. Then he moved toward the bar with purposeful strides. "Whiskey," he said when he reached me. Voice low, accent present but controlled. "Neat. Whatever you'd recommend." I reached for the Jameson decent middle shelf, poured 2 fingers into a rocks glass and set it in front of him. $8. He placed $100 on the bar without looking at it. "Keep it. That's excessive for one drink. Consider it a tip for working during a storm. He lifted the glass, took a sip, nodded. You've been here a while. Warning bells, quiet but insistent. 3 years. You're the new owner? Representative of Gabriel Fioraldi. I handle acquisitions and operations. He extended his hand. I hesitated before shaking it, his grip firm and warm, lasting slightly longer than professionally necessary. Jessica, I offered, using the surname I'd carried for 8 years without bothering to add it. Jessica, he repeated, like testing the weight of the name. Marco says you're reliable, never miss shifts. I try to be. Do you enjoy it? Bartending? The question caught me sideways. People didn't usually ask if I enjoyed my job. It pays bills. I'm good at it. Sufficient. Interesting word choice. He finished the whiskey. I'll be observing operations for the next week. Don't mind me. He moved to a corner booth after that, laptop open but barely looking at it. I felt his gaze return to me periodically throughout the night. By midnight when we closed, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid again. Except he came back Saturday. Same booth, same whiskey, same penetrating attention. And Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'd started documenting details. Expensive watch, different one each night. No wedding ring. Small scar near his left ear. The way he held himself suggested training. He was unfailingly polite, tipped absurdly well, never made inappropriate comments. And he watched me like he was solving an equation only he could see. Thursday night, the storm returned with friends. We had maybe 10 customers by 8, 5 by 9. Marco had gone home early, trusting me to close alone. Gabriel arrived at 9:30, exactly on schedule, water running off his coat. He ordered his usual drink. I delivered it personally, conscious of the empty space around us. Slow night, he observed. People are smart enough to stay home. But not you. I work here. Different obligation. He studied me with that unnerving intensity, then gestured to the seat across from him. Sit for a moment. Every instinct screamed not to. But refusing seemed more suspicious than accepting. You're very careful, Gabriel said quietly. Always aware of exits, who's entering, who's paying attention. Defensive posture disguised as professional awareness. Ice flooded my veins. I work in a bar. Being aware is survival. True. But your awareness goes beyond professional. You're watching for something specific. He leaned forward slightly. Or someone. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. I think you've been hiding a very long time, Jessica. I think you're tired of running but don't know how to stop. I stood abruptly. I need to finish closing. Of course. He didn't try to stop me. The last customers left around 10:15. I locked the door, set the alarm, grabbed my bag, and headed for the back exit. The rain had lessened to persistent drizzle. Gabriel was waiting under the overhang, umbrella in hand. My entire body went rigid. He saw it, raised his free hand in a calming gesture. I'm not here to hurt you, but we need to talk, and it can't wait. I don't have anything to discuss with you. Viktor Volkov escaped from federal custody 4 weeks ago. The words hit like physical blows. He's already killed 2 witnesses from his trial. Your handler, Agent Harris, was murdered 3 weeks ago trying to protect the first target. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the door frame for stability. That's not possible. Harris called me 3 weeks ago. He called you to warn you without tipping off whoever leaked witness locations. Then he died trying to save someone he couldn't reach in time. Gabriel took a careful step closer. I know who you are, Jessica Turner. I know what you witnessed 8 years ago. I know why you've been hiding. And I know Victor is coming for you. How? Because I've been tracking you for 8 months. Not to harm you. To understand the woman who testified against my half-brother's killer and disappeared into federal protection. His half-brother. Paolo, Victor's victim, the man whose blood I'd seen splattered across concrete. I need to leave. Now. Tonight. Running won't save you this time. Victor has resources, contacts, patience. He'll find you wherever you hide. Gabriel moved closer. But I can protect you. There's one way. One guarantee that even Victor's world respects. What? He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small velvet box, opened it to reveal a simple gold band. Marry me, Gabriel said. And everything I thought I understood about survival shattered into pieces I didn't know how to reassemble. The night Gabriel Fioraldi became the Velvet Lounge's new owner marked the beginning of something I couldn't name yet, but felt deep in my bones. The official changeover happened on a Saturday, 3 days after Marco's announcement, and the atmosphere in the bar shifted like the barometric pressure before a hurricane. I arrived for my shift at 7 to find the place already buzzing with a different energy. Marco was there, of course, looking simultaneously relieved and nostalgic as he showed Gabriel around the space he'd built over 20 years. Gabriel moved through the bar with the kind of confident ownership that suggested he'd done this before, his dark eyes taking in every detail with surgical precision. He was taller than I'd initially registered when he'd visited that rainy Thursday, easily 6'2" or 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored navy suit in a way that suggested he hadn't always worn expensive clothes. There was something underneath the polish, something rougher and more dangerous that the designer fabric couldn't quite conceal. Jessica. Marco called me over, his Greek accent thicker than usual. Come meet Mr. Fioraldi officially. I approached cautiously, aware that every interaction with new management was a potential minefield. Gabriel extended his hand, and I shook it with what I hoped was professional detachment. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted exactly 1 second longer than necessary, long enough for me to notice the calluses on his palm, that expensive suits shouldn't have. We've met briefly, Gabriel said, his voice carrying that same controlled accent I'd noticed before. Italian, definitely, but smoothed by years of careful American influence. You're the one Marco says never misses a shift, never complains, handles the difficult customers with grace. I just do my job, I replied evenly. That's what makes you exceptional. Most people in this city are either hustling to get somewhere else or drowning where they landed. You seem content exactly where you are. The observation was too accurate to be comfortable. The Velvet Lounge has been good to me. Then I hope to keep it that way. His dark eyes held mine for a beat too long before he turned back to Marco. Shall we finish the walkthrough? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of familiar routine, punctuated by Gabriel's presence. He didn't sit at the bar where owners typically position themselves to observe operations. Instead, he chose a corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances, the register, and most importantly, to me. I felt his attention like a physical weight throughout my shift, cataloging my movements, my interactions, the practiced efficiency with which I mixed drinks and deflected unwanted advances. Around 11, during a lull between the dinner crowd and the late-night regulars, I found myself wiping down glasses behind the bar when I looked up to find Gabriel standing directly in front of me. I hadn't heard him approach, which sent a spike of adrenaline through my system. You move differently when you think no one's watching, he observed quietly. My hands stilled on the glass. Excuse me? More efficiently, less performance. You're good at your job, but you're better when you're not consciously playing the role of bartender. He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a painting in a museum. What are you really good at, Jessica? Pouring drinks, managing difficult people, remembering orders, surviving, he countered. That's what you're really good at. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror every morning. Before I could formulate a response that wasn't either a confession or an outright lie, a group of college kids stumbled in, loud and already drunk from wherever they'd been before. Gabriel stepped back smoothly, returning to his booth and his laptop that I suspected was more prop than actual work. He stayed until closing, watching Marco leave with misty eyes and promises to visit, watching the last customers filter out into the Miami night. When I flipped the close sign and began my nightly routine, he remained in his booth, fingers steepled, dark eyes tracking my every movement. You can leave, I said without looking at him. I've got a key. I close alone all the time. I'm the owner now. I want to understand the full operation. A pause. Including what happens when you think you're unobserved. I turned to face him directly. Nothing happens when I'm unobserved. I clean, I count the register, I lock up, I go home. It's not complicated. Everything about you is complicated. Gabriel stood, moving toward the bar with that same predatory grace. You're 27 years old, working a job that requires no background checks, living in a city where nobody asks questions. You have no social media presence, no digital footprint beyond basic utility bills. You pay cash for everything when you can. You've never called in sick in 3 years. Ice flooded my veins. You've been investigating me? Due diligence. I buy businesses. I learn about the people who make them run. He leaned against the bar, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot. But your absence of information is more revealing than most people's entire life stories. Maybe I just value privacy. Maybe. Or maybe you're hiding from something. Someone. His voice dropped lower. Question is whether I should be concerned about that someone walking through my door looking for you. I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not let the panic show. I'm not in any trouble. I just prefer to keep my personal life separate from work. Commendable. But here's the thing about people who've spent years hiding. They develop patterns. Little tells. Gabriel reached across the bar, not touching me, but close. You count exits reflexively. You position yourself to see entrances. You never sit with your back exposed. You assess every person who walks in within 3 seconds of their arrival. That's not privacy, Jessica. That's training. I've been working bars since I was 21. You learn to read people or you get hurt. True. But you read people like someone who's been professionally taught threat assessment. Military? Law enforcement? He paused, watching my face. Or witness protection. The words hung between us like a blade. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think of a response that wouldn't confirm or deny in ways that would make everything worse. Gabriel's expression softened fractionally. I'm not your enemy, but I am curious about the woman who's become the heart of my newest acquisition. A woman who's clearly running from something but chose Miami, chose visibility in a public-facing job, chose to stay in one place for 3 years despite whatever she's afraid of. That takes either stupidity or incredible courage. Maybe I'm just stubborn. That too. He straightened, pulling back to a more professional distance. I'll be here most nights for the next couple weeks. Learning the rhythms, meeting regular customers, understanding what makes the Velvet Lounge work. That means you and I will be spending considerable time in proximity. I can handle it. I'm certain you can. You strike me as someone who can handle just about anything. Gabriel moved toward the door, retrieving his coat from the rack. But Jessica, if whatever you're running from shows up here, I need to know. Not because I'm concerned about my investment, though I am, because I prefer to know what threats might walk through my door. There's no threat. Then you have nothing to worry about. He paused at the door, looking back. Although I wonder why you're gripping that bottle like a weapon, if you're really as safe as you claim. I looked down to find my hand wrapped around a whiskey bottle, knuckles white. I set it down carefully, forcing my fingers to unclench. Lock up carefully, Gabriel said. Miami's not as safe as people pretend. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the dim bar with my racing heart and the certain knowledge that Gabriel Fioraldi knew exactly what I was, even if he didn't know the specifics yet. Over the next 4 nights, Gabriel established a pattern. He arrived at 9:30 each evening, ordered a single whiskey neat, nursed it for hours while working on his laptop or making quiet phone calls in Italian. He tipped exactly 200%. He never got drunk. And he watched me with unwavering attention that made my skin prickle with awareness. On the second night, he struck up conversations with regulars, learning names and stories with the kind of genuine interest that made people trust him. By the third night, the old-timers were seeking him out, sharing gossip and neighborhood politics like he'd been there for years instead of days. On the fourth night, I made a mistake. It was subtle, the kind of thing most people wouldn't notice. A man came in around 10, mid-40s, nondescript features, ordering beer and watching the basketball game on the television above the bar. But something about his positioning was wrong. He sat facing the mirror behind the bottles, which gave him a view of the entire room, including me. And he never actually watched the game. His eyes kept returning to my reflection. I'd been trained to notice these things, had spent 8 years honing instincts that kept me breathing. Without thinking, I shifted my position behind the bar to eliminate his sightline, put my back to the solid wall instead of the open space, and checked the exits. Gabriel saw all of it. His eyes tracked from me to the man to the exits and back. An understanding dawned across his features like sunrise. When the man left 20 minutes later, Gabriel waited exactly 3 minutes before approaching the bar. Who was he? His voice was quiet but urgent. Just a customer. You evaluated him in 2 seconds, marked him as a threat, and adjusted your defensive posture. That's not normal bartender awareness, Jessica. That's tactical training. I busied myself wiping down the already clean bar. You're reading too much into nothing. I've spent my entire adult life learning to read people. It's kept me alive in situations where mistakes are measured in body counts. Gabriel leaned in close enough that his voice was barely a murmur. Whatever you're hiding from, whoever you're afraid of, I can help. But I need to know what I'm dealing with. You can't help with this. Try me. I met his eyes finally. Saw something there beyond curiosity. Recognition, maybe. Or the kind of understanding that comes from personal experience with running and hiding and surviving. Why do you care? I asked. You bought a bar. I work here. That's the extent of our relationship. Because I know what it looks like when someone's living on borrowed time. I've been that person. Gabriel pulled back slightly, giving me space. And because the woman who's been making my investment successful deserves better than looking over her shoulder every night wondering if this is when her past catches up. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out reflexively and froze. Unknown number. Text message. One line that made my blood run cold. I haven't forgotten you, little witness. The phone slipped from my fingers. Gabriel caught it before it hit the floor, read the message, and his entire demeanor transformed from curious businessman to something far more dangerous. How long has this been happening? First time. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. It's the first time he's made contact since Chicago. Chicago. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Who's looking for you in Chicago? Someone I testified against. Someone who should still be in prison. I grabbed the phone back, deleting the message with shaking fingers. I need to leave. Tonight. I need to disappear again. No. The word was absolute. Running is what he expects. Running makes you vulnerable, isolated, easy to pick off when he finally corners you. Gabriel moved around the bar, invading my space in a way that should have felt threatening but somehow didn't. I have resources, protection, ways to keep you safe that federal bureaucracy can't match. You don't understand what you're offering. Then explain it to me. All of it. Starting with why someone in Chicago wants you dead, and ending with why you thought tending bar in Miami was a sustainable strategy. The last customers filtered out. I locked the door, flipped the sign, and for the first time in 8 years, considered telling someone the complete truth about that night in the alley, about Viktor Volkov, about the 26 months I'd spent looking over my shoulder waiting for retribution that I'd convinced myself might never come. Gabriel pulled out a chair at the nearest table, gestured for me to sit, and waited with a patience that felt infinite. His name is Viktor Volkov, I began. And I'm the reason he went to prison for murder. Gabriel drove us to a 24-hour diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights buzzed too loud, and the coffee tasted like it had been sitting since the previous shift. At 2 a.m, we were the only customers besides a trucker hunched over pancakes, and a woman reading a paperback novel with such intensity, I wondered if she was actually absorbing any words. We slid into a corner booth. Red vinyl cracked in places where duct tape held the stuffing inside. The waitress, somewhere in her 60s with hair dyed an improbable shade of copper, brought coffee without asking, and menus she clearly didn't expect us to read. "Take your time, sugar," she said, though her tone suggested the opposite. Gabriel waited until she retreated behind the counter before speaking. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, letting the heat anchor me to something tangible, while I excavated memories I'd spent 8 years trying to bury. I was 19, working at an Italian restaurant in Chicago, one of those places where the food was decent and the tips were good if you smiled at the right tables. My parents had died my senior year of high school, car accident on black ice, and the insurance money was enough for community college, but not much else. So I worked nights, took classes during the day, thought I had everything figured out. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his dark eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that would have felt invasive from anyone else. August 17th. Wednesday night. Late summer when Chicago gets sticky and humid, and everyone's temper runs short. I was closing, taking trash to the dumpster in the alley behind the restaurant. Should have been quick, in and out. But I heard voices. Two men arguing in that quiet, controlled way that means real violence is about to happen. The memory crystallized with the kind of clarity trauma provides. Viktor Volkov, though I hadn't known his name then, standing over a man who was begging in Russian or Ukrainian, or some language I couldn't identify, the streetlight catching the gun in Viktor's hand. The wet sound of a bullet entering flesh, the way the victim crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. I froze. Stupidest possible reaction, but my body just stopped working. And Viktor looked up and saw me standing there with a trash bag in my hands, probably looking exactly as terrified as I felt. I took a sip of coffee, bitter and too hot. He smiled. Actually smiled, like we were sharing a joke instead of a murder. Then he wiped his hands on a handkerchief and walked away like nothing had happened. But you reported it, Gabriel said quietly. I ran inside, called 911, told them everything I'd seen. The police came, found the body, found shell casings, started an investigation. And 3 days later, FBI agents showed up at my apartment saying I was in danger, that Viktor Volkov was connected to organized crime networks across the eastern seaboard, that witnesses against him had a habit of disappearing or recanting their testimony. The waitress reappeared with a pot of coffee, refilling both our mugs without comment before vanishing again. They offered witness protection. New name, new city, new life in exchange for testifying. I was 19 and terrified and had no family left to worry about. So I said yes, spent the next 6 months in protective custody, memorizing details, preparing for trial, learning how to be someone named Jessica Turner instead of whatever I'd been before. Gabriel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. What was your real name? Does it matter? That person died when I watched Viktor put a bullet in a man's skull. Jessica Turner is who survived. I traced the rim of the coffee mug with one finger. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Viktor stared at me the entire time I testified. Never broke eye contact. Never showed emotion. His lawyer tried to tear apart my credibility, claimed I was lying for attention or money or some other invented motivation. But the evidence supported my testimony. The jury convicted, and Viktor got life without parole. 26-year sentence for first-degree murder. Gabriel murmured. I looked up sharply. How did you know that? Because Paolo Russo, the man Viktor killed that night, was my half-brother. The words landed like stones in still water. Son of my father's mistress. Born 6 years before me, to a woman in Naples my father visited twice a year when he claimed to be conducting business. I didn't know Paolo existed until after he died, when my father had to explain why he was flying to Chicago for the funeral of someone none of us had heard of. The air between us charged with implications I was still processing. Your father was connected to organized crime. Is connected. Antonio Fioraldi doesn't retire from family business. He just delegates more as he gets older. Gabriel's jaw tightened fractionally. Paolo was trying to build his own operation in Chicago, thought he could expand family influence without approval. Stupid and arrogant, but he was 28 and believed himself invincible. Viktor was sent to deliver a message about territorial respect. The message was a bullet. So you've been tracking me for 8 months because I testified against your brother's killer? Half-brother. And not quite. Gabriel pulled out his phone, swiped to a folder, and turned the screen to face me. Photographs filled the display. Grainy surveillance photos of a man who looked like Viktor, but with shaggier hair and a beard that obscured half his face. Newspaper articles with headlines about prison escapes. Crime scene photos I wish I hadn't seen. Viktor escaped from maximum security 4 weeks ago. Killed 2 guards during the breakout, both shot execution style. Gabriel swiped to the next image. 36 hours later, Marcus Thompson was found in his apartment in Cleveland. Throat cut, apartment ransacked. Marcus testified against Viktor as a forensic accountant who traced money laundering schemes. My hands started shaking. Gabriel reached across the table, steadied the coffee mug before I could spill it. 72 hours after that, Elena Rodriguez disappeared from her home in Philadelphia. She was a neighbor who witnessed Victor meeting with known associates before the murder. They found her body 3 days later in a warehouse outside the city. Another swipe, another crime scene I couldn't unsee. Tortured before she died. Victor wanted information about other witnesses. Agent Harris, I whispered. He called me 3 weeks ago saying he was being transferred. Agent Harris died 3.5 weeks ago. Single gunshot to the head in his car outside a coffee shop where he was meeting with the first witness. Victor made it look like a robbery, but the FBI knows better. Gabriel's voice was clinically calm, delivering devastating news with surgical precision. The agent who called you was likely someone inside the federal system who's been feeding Victor information about witness locations. Harris tried to warn you without compromising himself, and died for it. The diner felt too bright, too exposed. I looked around at the trucker, the woman with her book, the waitress wiping down counters, and wondered if any of them could be watching me, reporting back to Victor about the witness who'd survived this long. Why haven't you gone to the FBI yourself? I asked. If you've been tracking all this, you must have evidence. Because the FBI has a leak, possibly multiple leaks, and I don't know who to trust. Gabriel closed his phone, pocketed it. Because my family's business interests make federal agents uncomfortable, and approaching them about a fugitive hunting witnesses would invite scrutiny I can't afford. And because 8 months ago, when I started researching what happened to Paolo, I became curious about you. Curious. A 19-year-old girl with no connections to organized crime. No reason to risk her life testifying except that she saw something horrible and couldn't stay silent. That kind of courage is rare. He paused. I wanted to understand who you were. Started with public records, moved to hiring investigators to track Jessica Turner's movements, eventually found you here in Miami pouring drinks and pretending you didn't have a past. That's stalking. That's due diligence before making a business acquisition. Gabriel's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. I'd already planned to buy the Velvet Lounge as an investment property. Discovering you worked there was convenient coincidence. Finding out Victor had escaped changed my timeline for making contact. The pieces were assembling into a picture I didn't want to see. You think Victor knows where I am. I think Victor is systematically eliminating everyone who testified against him, and you're the primary witness. The one whose testimony was most damaging, most detailed, most impossible to discredit. Gabriel leaned forward, voice dropping lower. He'll save you for last because you're the biggest threat. But he's coming. And when he gets here, federal protection won't be sufficient. So what are you offering? Private security? A safe house? Something Victor's world understands and respects universally. Gabriel reached into his jacket, pulled out a small velvet box, and set it on the table between us. Marriage. To someone with family connections strong enough that killing you would start a war nobody can afford. I stared at the box like it might contain a live grenade. That's insane. That's survival. In my father's world, in the networks that overlap with Victor's operations, marriage creates alliances that are sacred, untouchable. You become family, which means attacking you attacks me, which means attacking the Fioraldi network. Victor is dangerous, but he's not suicidal. We don't know each other. We've had exactly one real conversation. You can't seriously expect me to marry you. I expect you to consider the alternative. Gabriel opened the box, revealing a simple gold band that caught the diner's harsh lights. Keep running until Victor corners you in some city where you have no resources and no backup. Or stay here under protection that comes with legal weight and social consequences for anyone who harms you. This is medieval. Using marriage as a protection racket. Welcome to the world that killed my half-brother and has been hunting you for 8 years. Gabriel's expression was completely serious. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for anything beyond the legal contract and public appearance of marriage. You stay in my apartment, you get 24/7 security, you continue working at the lounge if you want or find different employment if you prefer. We maintain separate lives with one crucial difference. The ring on your finger that tells Victor killing you means starting a war with people who have longer reach and deeper pockets than he does. The waitress reappeared, asking if we wanted food. Gabriel ordered eggs and toast neither of us would eat. I asked for pancakes I had no appetite for. She left again, and the silence stretched between us. Why would you do this? I finally asked. Risk your family's reputation, your business interests, your entire life for someone you've been stalking for 8 months? Because Paolo was my brother, and the woman who made sure his killer went to prison deserves to live long enough to build an actual life. Gabriel closed the box, pushed it across the table toward me, and because I've spent my entire adult life watching people get consumed by the world my father built. If I can keep one person from becoming another casualty, maybe that matters. I picked up the box, felt the weight of it in my palm. Inside was a future I'd never imagined, with a man I barely knew, protected by the very world I'd been running from. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow noon. After that, I'm moving you to a secure location with or without your cooperation, because Victor sent that text message for a reason. He wants you scared and running, which means he's close enough to track your movements. Gabriel pulled out his wallet, left cash on the table for food we wouldn't finish. I'll drive you home. You'll pack essentials. Tomorrow morning you'll either call me accepting my offer, or I'll have security pick you up anyway. That's not really giving me a choice. No, he agreed. It's not. Because I've seen the crime scene photos of what Victor does to witnesses he catches, and I'm not interested in seeing you become the next set of images in an FBI file. We left the diner as the sun started bleeding orange across Miami's skyline. Gabriel drove me back to my apartment building, a converted warehouse with questionable plumbing and neighbors who mostly minded their own business. He walked me to my door despite my protests, checked inside with professional efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. Lock everything. Don't answer the door for anyone. I'll have someone watching the building until morning. He handed me a business card with a phone number written on the back. My personal line. If anything happens, anything at all, you call immediately. Okay. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Jessica, I know this is insane. I know I'm asking you to trust a stranger with your life, but I've never let anyone under my protection get hurt, and I don't plan to start now. Then he was gone, and I was alone in my apartment with a velvet box containing a marriage proposal from a Mafia boss who'd been tracking me for months because I'd witnessed his half-brother's murder. I set the box on my kitchen counter and stared at it until sunrise painted my walls gold and pink, wondering if survival was worth the price Gabriel was asking me to pay. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Instead, I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment blazing, the velvet box open on the coffee table, and my laptop searching for information about Viktor Volkov that the FBI had probably classified or scrubbed from public access. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Viktor wasn't just connected to organized crime. He was a specialist, a cleaner, the person criminal networks hired when they needed someone eliminated quietly and thoroughly. Born in Vladivostok, trained in military intelligence before the Soviet Union collapsed, then freelanced his particular skills to whoever could afford his rates. The murder I'd witnessed in Chicago was supposed to be a professional execution, clean and untraceable. My presence had turned it into evidence. By 4 a.m, I'd read everything available about the 2 witnesses Victor had already killed. Marcus Thompson, 43, married with 2 kids, worked as a forensic accountant, and had traced money laundering schemes back to Victor's employers. Elena Rodriguez, 38, single mother of 1, happened to live in the apartment next to where Victor had met with associates the week before Paolo's murder. Both had been in federal protection. Both had been found within days of Victor's escape. I pulled up the photo Gabriel had shown me at the diner, the crime scene image I wished I could unsee. Elena's body positioned deliberately. A message to anyone else thinking about testifying. Victor didn't just kill his targets. He made examples of them. At 6 a.m, as gray dawn light started filtering through my windows, I found it. An envelope that had been slipped under my door sometime during the night. Standard white paper with no markings. Inside was a single photograph, aged and creased like it had been carried in someone's pocket for years. It was me, 19 years old, coming out of the courthouse after testifying. Federal agents flanking me on both sides. Someone had drawn a red X over my face in marker, the kind of deliberate defacement that communicated clear intent. My hands shook holding the photograph. Victor had been here. Not just in Miami, not just in my neighborhood, but at my actual door, while I'd been sitting 3 feet away researching his methodology. He could have killed me then. Could have kicked in the flimsy door and finished what he'd started 8 years ago. But he hadn't. Because Victor didn't just want me dead, he wanted me terrified first. I grabbed my phone, dialed the number Gabriel had written on his business card. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the early hour. Jessica. He was here. At my apartment. Last night while you and I were talking, he left something under my door. The words tumbled out too fast. A photograph from Chicago with my face marked out. He knows exactly where I live, Gabriel. He's been watching me. Get out, now. Don't pack, don't hesitate. Just leave the apartment immediately and walk to the corner of 5th and Washington. I'll have someone there in 3 minutes. I need my things. I can't just leave everything. Your things are replaceable. You're not. His voice carried absolute authority. 3 minutes, Jessica. Move. I grabbed my purse, my phone, the photograph because evidence mattered, and ran. Took the stairs instead of the elevator, burst out the side exit into humid Miami dawn, and sprinted the 2 blocks to 5th and Washington without looking back. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up exactly as I reached the corner. The passenger door opened from inside. Get in, a voice said. Male, gravelly, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I hesitated for half a second before climbing into the vehicle. The man in the driver's seat was maybe 50, built like a boxer who'd stayed in shape, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and eyes that catalogued me efficiently. Vincent, he said by way of introduction. Mr. Fioraldi's head of security. We're taking you somewhere safe until he can meet us. Where? Hotel in Coral Gables. Private suite, registered under a business account that has no connection to your name. You'll stay there until Mr. Fioraldi makes arrangements. Vincent pulled into traffic with the practiced ease of someone who knew Miami's patterns intimately. Did anyone follow you from your apartment? I don't think so. I didn't see anyone. Doesn't mean they weren't there. Victor Volkov is professionally trained in surveillance. If he wanted to track you without being noticed, you wouldn't see him until he wanted you to. The statement didn't exactly comfort me. I clutched my purse in my lap, watching the city slide past through tinted windows, feeling like I'd stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to hit ground. The hotel was exactly as Vincent described. Upscale but not ostentatious. The kind of place business travelers chose for convenience rather than luxury. He walked me through a side entrance that bypassed the main desk, up a service elevator to the 8th floor, and into a suite that probably cost more per night than I made in a week. Lock everything. Don't order room service. Don't answer the door unless you verify through the peephole that it's me or Mr. Fioraldi. There's food in the kitchenette, toiletries in the bathroom, clothes in the closet that should approximately fit. Vincent handed me a key card and a phone, newer model than the one I carried. This phone is clean, encrypted, untraceable. Mr. Fioraldi's number is programmed in. Use it instead of your personal device. How long do I need to stay here? Until Mr. Fioraldi determines the next step. Could be hours, could be days. Vincent moved toward the door. For what it's worth, you made the right choice running. Victor showing up at your apartment means he's in the endgame phase. Whatever you decide about Mr. Fioraldi's offer, you can't go back to your old life. That option ended the moment Victor left that photograph. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a hotel suite that smelled like lemon furniture polish and recycled air, wearing yesterday's clothes and clutching a photograph of my 19-year-old self marked for death. I showered in water hot enough to scald, scrubbing away the feeling of being watched that clung to my skin. The clothes Vincent mentioned were folded neatly in the closet, still had tags attached. Simple pieces in muted colors. Nothing flashy or memorable. Practical choices made by someone who understood the need to blend in. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Gabriel had been studying me longer and more carefully than I'd realized. The observation should have felt invasive, but instead registered as thorough. Gabriel didn't do anything halfway, including protecting a witness who'd helped convict his half-brother's killer. The encrypted phone buzzed around 9. Text message from a number I didn't recognize but assumed was Gabriel. Meeting with associates this morning to arrange security protocols. We'll come by the hotel at noon to discuss next steps. Don't leave the suite for any reason. I typed back a simple acknowledgement, then spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could find about Gabriel Fioraldi, using the hotel's Wi-Fi and my old phone that I'd turned off immediately after Vincent's warning. Gabriel was 34, born in Naples and moved to the United States when he was 12 after his father established operations in Miami. Educated at Columbia, degree in business and economics, worked in legitimate real estate development before taking over his father's more complicated interests 5 years ago, when Antonio Fioraldi had a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. On paper, Gabriel was clean. Property investments, restaurant partnerships, import-export businesses that probably involved some creative accounting, but nothing explicitly illegal. The kind of portfolio that let him move in legitimate business circles while maintaining connections to his father's less savory networks. Between the lines, in the gaps where information should have been but wasn't, lived a different story. Gabriel had been questioned twice by federal authorities about associates who later turned up dead. He'd been present at meetings where FBI surveillance suggested organized crime discussions were happening. His name appeared in sealed court documents connected to racketeering investigations that never quite produced charges. He was everything I'd been taught to avoid, running from, terrified of, and he was offering to marry me to keep me alive. The knock at noon was precise. 3 measured raps that announced themselves without urgency. I checked the peephole, saw Gabriel standing in the hallway wearing a charcoal suit and an expression of controlled concern, and unlocked the door. He entered with the same efficiency Vincent had shown, checking the suite's layout and sightlines before turning his full attention to me. "Show me the photograph." I handed it over. He studied it for a long moment, jaw tightening fractionally as he processed the implications. "This is from the day you testified. I remember seeing news coverage, the federal agents escorting you out through the side entrance to avoid reporters." Gabriel set the photograph on the coffee table like evidence in a case he was building. "Victor kept this for 8 years, carried it as a reminder of unfinished business. He wants me scared. He wants you isolated and vulnerable. Fear is just the tool he's using to achieve that." Gabriel sat down on the couch, gestured for me to take the chair across from him. "I've spent the morning making arrangements. Private security team around the clock, safe transportation, secure locations. But all of that requires your cooperation, which means I need your answer. About marriage. About survival. Marriage is just the mechanism." He pulled out the velvet box again, the ring inside catching light from the suite's windows. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to pretend this is anything other than a strategic alliance. But I am asking you to trust that I can keep you alive when federal protection has already failed twice." I stared at the ring, at the simple gold band that represented a future I'd never imagined. "What happens after? If you catch Victor, if the threat ends, what happens to this strategic alliance? We negotiate new terms. Annulment if you want. Continued arrangement if it serves both our interests. Actual relationship if something develops organically. But that's a conversation for when you're not actively being hunted." Gabriel's voice was measured, laying out facts without embellishment. "Right now, you have 2 choices. Accept my protection and the marriage that comes with it, or I put you on a plane to somewhere even I can't easily track and you spend the rest of your life running from shadows. Those aren't really choices." "No," he agreed. "They're not. But they're what's available given current circumstances." I thought about Agent Harris, who'd tried to protect me and died for the effort. About Marcus Thompson and Elena Rodriguez, who'd trusted federal systems and paid with their lives. About 8 years of looking over my shoulder, changing my name, pretending I didn't have a past that wanted me dead. If I say yes, this happens immediately. No waiting period, no time to process. We have a courthouse appointment at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Private ceremony judge I trust. Minimal witnesses. You'll sign the marriage license as Jessica Turner, which makes it legally binding under your protected identity. The ring goes on your finger, and by 3 o'clock you're under protection that extends beyond federal bureaucracy. And I move in with you. Into my apartment, yes. Separate bedroom, separate space, whatever boundaries you need to feel secure. But we maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage, which means being seen together in public occasionally, attending events as a couple, presenting unified front to anyone checking whether this is real. I picked up the photograph Victor had left, studied my 19-year-old face marked for death. That girl had been brave enough to testify despite knowing the consequences. She deserved better than dying in a hotel room waiting for a killer who'd spent 8 years planning revenge. "Okay," I said. "I'll marry you." Gabriel's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed fractionally. He stood, extended his hand formally like we were sealing a business deal, rather than binding our lives together. "You won't regret this decision. I already regret it, but it's still the right choice." "Fair enough." He checked his watch. Expensive piece I didn't recognize the brand of. "Vincent will bring appropriate clothing for the ceremony. Nothing elaborate, just professional attire that photographs well if anyone decides to check public records. We'll leave here at 1:30, take separate cars to avoid obvious connection, and meet at the courthouse side entrance." This all feels surreal. That's shock processing trauma. It'll fade once immediate danger passes and you adjust to new circumstances. Gabriel moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "Jessica, I know you don't trust me yet. I know this entire situation violates every instinct you've developed about staying invisible and avoiding connections. But I'm good at protecting what's mine, and as of 2:00 this afternoon, you'll be legally mine to protect." The possessive phrasing should have triggered alarm bells. Instead, it registered as comforting in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. Vincent arrived at 1 with clothing as promised. Navy dress in a professional cut that hit just below the knee, low heels I could actually walk in, minimal jewelry that looked expensive without being flashy. Everything fit perfectly because of course it did. Gabriel's attention to detail extended to knowing my exact measurements without ever asking. The drive to the courthouse was silent. Vincent navigating downtown traffic with professional efficiency. Gabriel was already waiting when we arrived, standing in the shadow of a side entrance with a man I assumed was his lawyer, based on the expensive suit and leather briefcase. "This is Marco," Gabriel said by way of introduction. "He'll serve as witness along with Vincent. The ceremony will take approximately 7 minutes. Then we'll handle paperwork and you'll leave with me. 7 minutes to change my entire life." Seemed both too fast and not fast enough. The judge was a woman in her 60s, who looked like she'd performed this particular ritual more times than she could count. She read through the legal requirements in a monotone that suggested deep boredom, asked if we understood the commitment we were making, and didn't seem particularly interested in our answers. "Do you, Gabriele Luciano Fioraldi, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." No hesitation, no uncertainty. "And do you, Jessica Marie Turner, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I looked at Gabriel, at the man who'd been tracking me for months, because I'd testified against his brother's killer, who was offering protection wrapped in marriage, who represented everything I'd been running from, and the only chance I had at survival. "I do." The judge pronounced us married with the same disinterested efficiency she'd used throughout the ceremony. Gabriel slid the ring onto my finger, the gold band warm against my skin like it had been waiting for this moment. He leaned in for the traditional kiss, brief and chaste, and utterly devoid of romance. "Congratulations," the judge said, already reaching for the next file on her desk. "Next." And just like that, I was married to a man I barely knew, wearing a ring that marked me as protected property in a world I'd spent 8 years trying to escape, betting my survival on a strategic alliance that couldn't possibly end well. Gabriel's apartment occupied the entire 23rd floor of a high-rise overlooking Biscayne Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of water that shifted from turquoise to deep blue depending on the light. The furniture was expensive but comfortable, the kind of understated luxury that came from having money so long you stopped trying to prove it. "Your room is down this hall," Gabriel said, leading me past his office and what appeared to be a home gym. "Private bathroom, walk-in closet, everything you should need. Vincent had your belongings moved from your apartment this morning. I took the liberty of having him collect everything rather than making you go back." The bedroom was larger than my entire previous apartment. King-sized bed with gray linens, seating area by the window, original artwork on the walls. And in the corner, incongruous but somehow perfect, my grandmother's quilt folded across a chair, my small collection of books arranged on a shelf, my few personal items carefully placed like they'd always belonged here. I asked Vincent to include anything that seemed personally significant, Gabriel said from the doorway. "If he missed something, let me know and I'll have it retrieved." "This is fine." More than fine. I touched the quilt, felt tears threatening and forced them back. "Thank you for bringing my things. You're my wife now. Your comfort matters." He checked his watch again. "I have a meeting this evening that can't be postponed. There's food in the kitchen, my office is off limits, but the rest of the apartment is yours to explore. If you need anything, my direct number is programmed into the secure phone. What do I do now? Whatever you want, within reason. Read, watch television, sleep if you can. Adjust to being safe for the first time in 8 years." Gabriel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You've survived a long time by running, Jessica. You can stop now. That's what this marriage guarantees." He left me alone in my new bedroom, in my new life, wearing a wedding ring I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the expensive mattress compress beneath me, and tried to convince myself that marrying a mafia boss to escape an assassin was a reasonable survival strategy. Through the windows, Miami spread out in golden afternoon light, beautiful and dangerous and utterly indifferent to the choices we made to stay alive. I wondered how long it would take before this started feeling normal, or if Gabriel's protection would just be another kind of cage with better furniture and more complicated locks. The ring caught light, glinting with deceptive simplicity. I was married, to Gabriel Fioraldi, for better or worse, in danger and in safety, until Victor was caught or I was dead. I hoped it would be the former. 3 weeks of living with Gabriel established rhythms I hadn't anticipated. He left for work before 7 most mornings, returning anywhere between 9 at night and 2 in the morning, depending on what he vaguely described as business obligations. I didn't ask for details. Plausible deniability felt safer than confirmed knowledge about whatever kept him occupied. The apartment became familiar in increments. I learned which floorboards creaked, where the sun hit hardest during afternoon hours, the precise angle needed to coax the espresso machine into cooperation. Gabriel had shown me the basics that first morning, patient as I fumbled with knobs and pressurized steam, and now I could produce something approaching decent coffee without scalding myself. He'd arranged freelance design work through contacts he claimed were legitimate, though I suspected at least some operated in gray areas where business and family interest blurred. The projects were simple enough: logo designs for restaurants, branding packages for import companies, website layouts for businesses that might or might not be fronts for money laundering. I didn't examine too closely. The work paid well, kept my skills sharp, and filled hours that would otherwise stretch empty and anxious. Mornings developed a pattern. I'd wake around 6:30 to find Gabriel already dressed, usually in the kitchen with his tablet and first cup of espresso, dark hair still damp from his shower. He'd nod acknowledgement without speaking, comfortable with silence in a way that took me days to adjust to. Most people felt compelled to fill quiet spaces with conversation. Gabriel seemed to prefer the absence of unnecessary words. By the second week, I'd started making coffee for both of us. Small gesture, barely worth mentioning, but Gabriel noticed. I'd catch him studying me when he thought I wasn't looking, expression calculating like he was solving an equation that kept producing unexpected variables. "You take yours with cream," he observed one morning. "2 sugars. But you didn't the first few days." I was being polite. Didn't want to seem demanding. "This is your home now. Be demanding." He returned to his tablet, scrolling through what looked like financial reports. "I prefer people who state their actual preferences rather than performing politeness." I filed that information away with the other details I was accumulating about Gabriel Fioraldi. He valued directness, disliked pretense, kept his actual thoughts locked behind careful control that slipped occasionally when he thought himself unobserved, like when he spoke to his mother on Sunday mornings, his voice softening into Italian that flowed too quickly for me to follow, even with the limited phrases I'd been teaching myself through language apps. The security protocols were extensive but subtle. Vincent or another member of Gabriel's team accompanied me anywhere outside the building, which meant I rarely left. Grocery deliveries were screened in the lobby. The windows were bulletproof, something Gabriel mentioned casually while showing me how to operate the automated shades. Cameras covered every angle of the hallway outside our door, feeds monitored by people I never met, but whose presence I felt constantly. Am I actually safe, or just in a prettier cage? I asked one evening after Gabriel returned from a particularly late meeting. He'd loosened his tie, shed his jacket, looked tired in a way that made him seem more human and less like the controlled businessman he presented to the world. "You're safe," the The cage description isn't entirely inaccurate, but it's temporary. Once Victor is neutralized, security can relax. How long will that take? However long it takes. Weeks, months, possibly longer. Victor is professionally cautious. He won't move against you until he's certain of success, which means we wait him out while building defenses he can't penetrate. Gabriel poured himself whiskey from the bar cart, didn't offer me any. Is the confinement becoming intolerable? It's better than being dead. Low bar for measuring satisfaction, but accurate. He took a sip, studying me over the rim of his glass. You're handling this better than most would. 3 weeks of sudden marriage to a stranger, complete life upheaval, constant security presence. Yet you've adapted with minimal complaint. Complaining wouldn't change circumstances. Seems like wasted energy. Practical. I appreciate that. Gabriel set down his glass, moved to the windows overlooking the bay. Moonlight painted the water silver and black, boats moving like distant stars across the darkness. Tell me something true, Jessica. Something about who you were before Chicago, before witness protection erased your history. The request caught me sideways. We'd maintained careful distance during these weeks. Polite roommates playing house for security cameras, and the handful of staff members who occasionally entered the apartment. Personal revelations weren't part of the arrangement. Why do you want to know? Because I married you, and I barely know you beyond the facts in your federal file. Seems like information worth acquiring. He turned to face me, expression genuinely curious beneath the usual control. What did 19-year-old you dream about accomplishing before everything went to hell? I considered deflecting, then remembered his earlier comment about preferring directness. Architecture. Not graphic design. That was just the cover story I developed for job applications that didn't require portfolio reviews. I wanted to design spaces that changed how people experienced the world. Buildings with light and purpose and consideration for human psychology. Why didn't you pursue it after the trial? Because witness protection doesn't facilitate college enrollment under false identities, and architecture programs require references I couldn't provide without exposing my location. The bitterness surprised me. I'd thought I'd processed that particular loss years ago. I was 19 with half a degree and no legal way to finish, so I learned bartending and graphic design and how to be forgettable. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, something working behind his dark eyes. If this situation resolves successfully, if Victor is captured and you're genuinely safe again, what would you want? That's hypothetical. Humor me. I traced the rim of my water glass, considering possibilities I'd stopped letting myself imagine. Go back to school maybe. Finish the degree I started. Design something real instead of logos for businesses that might be fronts for criminal enterprises. That's achievable. When Victor is no longer a threat, if you want to pursue architecture, I can arrange enrollment. Legitimate credentials, portfolio development, whatever you need. Gabriel's tone carried certainty that made the offer feel less like fantasy and more like actionable plan. You're my wife. Your goals matter. We both know this marriage is strategic convenience, not actual partnership. Does that preclude me from wanting you to have a life worth living? He returned to the couch, maintaining careful distance. I'm not offering this out of misplaced guilt or romantic delusion. I'm offering it because you deserve better than the survival you've been forced to accept. The statement landed with unexpected weight. Most people in Gabriel's position would have been content with my compliance, with maintaining the arrangement without examining whether I was actually okay beyond baseline physical safety. His concern felt genuine in a way that made my carefully maintained emotional distance harder to sustain. Thank you, I said quietly, for the offer, for the consideration, for not treating me like an obligation you're stuck with. You're not an obligation. You're a very brave woman who made impossible choices at 19 and has been paying for those choices ever since. Gabriel's expression softened fractionally. The least I can do is ensure you eventually get to stop paying. That conversation marked another shift between us. The polite distance remained, but underneath grew something that felt almost like friendship. Gabriel started explaining his business interests when I asked, walking me through legitimate real estate developments and import operations with patience that suggested he actually enjoyed having someone to discuss strategy with. I cooked dinner occasionally using his absurdly well-equipped kitchen, and he'd close his eyes savoring flavors like each meal was a revelation instead of simple pasta dishes I'd learned from YouTube videos. 3 weeks in, routine fractured when I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Gabriel's voice raised in the kind of controlled fury that was somehow more frightening than outright shouting. I grabbed a robe and crept down the hallway toward his office, door slightly ajar, light spilling across hardwood floors. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian punctuated by words I recognized only as profanity. Pacing behind his desk, tie gone, sleeves rolled up, looking more dangerous than I'd seen him. When he caught sight of me in the doorway, his expression shifted immediately to concern. "I'll call you back," he said in English, disconnecting without waiting for response. "Did I wake you? What happened?" "Nothing you need to worry about. Business complication that required immediate attention." But his jaw remained tight, hands clenched at his sides. "Gabriel, I live here now. I'm not oblivious to when something's seriously wrong." I stepped into the office, despite every self-preservation instinct suggesting I maintain distance. "Does this have something to do with Victor?" He studied me for a long moment, clearly calculating how much to reveal. "Yes. One of my contacts reported activity suggesting Victor is in Miami. No confirmed sighting yet, but enough indicators that I'm increasing security protocols starting tomorrow. ICE flooded my system. He's here. In the city. Possibly. Could be deliberate misinformation meant to flush you out, or make you panic. Victor understands psychological warfare." Gabriel moved around the desk, close enough that I could see exhaustion behind the anger. "Either way, I'm not taking chances. Vincent will coordinate additional security. You'll have constant escort even within the building, and I'm suspending any outside activities until we verify the threat. So back to complete lockdown. Back to maximum caution. I know it's frustrating, but your safety outweighs convenience." He paused, then added more softly, "I won't let him get to you, Jessica. That's not an empty promise. I've never lost someone under my protection, and I don't intend to start with my wife." The possessive phrasing should have triggered alarm. Instead, it settled warm and unexpectedly comforting in my chest. Gabriel meant what he said. Whatever his motivations, whatever complicated family obligations drove his choices, he was genuinely committed to keeping me alive. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of being locked down, but of how much I'm starting to trust you. 8 years of training myself not to rely on anyone, and 3 weeks with you is undermining every survival instinct I developed. Trust is a risk, but so is complete isolation." Gabriel reached out slowly, giving me time to retreat, and touched my shoulder with careful restraint. "You don't have to trust me completely. Just enough to let me do my job protecting you. What if that's not sustainable? What if I start relying on you and then this arrangement ends, and I've forgotten how to survive alone? Then we'll address that when circumstances change. But right now, in this moment, you're not alone. That matters more than hypothetical future complications." His hand dropped away, professional distance reasserting. "Go back to bed. Try to sleep. I'll be monitoring the situation, but there's nothing productive you can do at 3 a.m. besides rest." I returned to my room but didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in expensive sheets, watching Miami's lights through bulletproof windows, and wondering when survival had started feeling like something more complicated than just staying alive. Gabriel was dangerous, connected to networks that had terrified me for 8 years. And somehow he'd become the thing standing between me and Victor's carefully planned revenge. The next morning, security presence increased visibly. 2 men I didn't recognize positioned themselves in the hallway outside our apartment. Vincent appeared more frequently, coordinating with Gabriel in low voices that stopped whenever I entered rooms. The atmosphere shifted from cautious routine to active alert, everyone moving with heightened awareness that communicated clear message. The threat was real, close, and escalating. Gabriel worked from home that day, unusual enough that I noticed. He set up in the living room rather than his office, laptop and phone constantly active, fielding calls in 3 different languages while simultaneously reviewing security footage on multiple screens. I worked at the dining table, pretending to focus on logo concepts while actually watching him orchestrate whatever strategy he was implementing. Around 3 p.m, he looked up and caught me staring. "Questions?" he asked. Always. But I'm not sure I want the answers. Fair assessment. Gabriel closed his laptop, giving me full attention. I need to teach you something. Not because I think security will fail, but because preparation matters. Teach me what? How to recognize when you're being surveilled. How to identify secondary exits. Basic situational awareness that could save your life if circumstances deteriorate. He stood, moved to where I sat, pulled out the chair beside me. You had FBI training 8 years ago, but you're out of practice. We're fixing that. Over the next 2 hours, Gabriel walked me through threat assessment with the patience of someone who'd taught this before. How to spot patterns in seemingly random foot traffic. How to use reflective surfaces to monitor people without obvious surveillance. How to calculate escape routes based on building layouts and crowd psychology. He pulled up security footage from various locations, had me identify anomalies, pointed out tells I'd missed. You're thinking too specifically, he said when I struggled with one scenario. Victor won't look like a threat. He'll look like someone who belongs exactly where he is. You're not searching for obvious danger, you're searching for things that don't quite fit the environment. That's almost impossible to detect. It's very difficult to detect, which is why we practice until it becomes instinctive. Gabriel pulled up another image. Try again. Same coffee shop, different angle. Tell me what doesn't fit. I studied the photograph carefully, looking past the obvious customers to examine positioning, sightlines, body language. Then I saw it. A woman seated facing the wrong direction for optimal table usage, positioned to watch the entrance rather than engage with her companion. Her, I said, pointing. She's oriented for observation, not conversation. Correct. Small detail. But in aggregate, these details create patterns. Gabriel's expression held something that might have been approval. You're better at this than you think. The skills are still there, just buried under 8 years of trying to be invisible instead of actively aware. Why does it matter if I can identify surveillance? I'm trapped in this apartment anyway, because I need you functional if something goes wrong. Need you able to make smart choices under pressure rather than freezing when threat appears. His voice was serious, darker than usual. I don't anticipate security failing, but Victor is professionally trained and patient. If he does find an opening, you need to be ready. The unspoken implication hung between us. Gabriel was preparing me for the possibility of his protection failing, for circumstances where I'd need to survive alone. That night, I dreamed about Chicago, about the alley, the gunshot, Victor's smile. But this time, when I woke gasping, Gabriel was there, not touching me, just sitting on the edge of my bed in sleep pants and a t-shirt. Solid presence in the darkness. You screamed, he said quietly. I heard it from my room. Sorry, nightmare. I'm fine. You're not fine, but you're safe. Those aren't the same thing. He didn't move, didn't crowd my space, just remained present until my breathing steadied. Want to talk about it? Not really. Talking won't change what I saw, or make Victor less terrifying. No, but it might make carrying it alone less exhausting. Gabriel's voice was careful, offering without demanding. I've got my own nightmares, Jessica. Different circumstances, same basic horror. Sometimes sharing the weight makes it slightly more bearable. So I told him. About 19-year-old me taking out trash, about the gunshot that echoed off brick walls, about Victor's eyes meeting mine with recognition that promised this wasn't over, about testifying while he watched with patient certainty that he'd find me eventually, about 8 years of waiting for that promise to materialize. Gabriel listened without interrupting, and when I finally ran out of words, he spoke with quiet intensity that carried absolute conviction. He won't get to you. That's not empty reassurance. I've been preparing defenses since before I contacted you, building security layers Victor can't easily penetrate. You're not alone in this anymore. I'm starting to believe that, which terrifies me almost as much as Victor does. Trusting people is terrifying, but so is dying alone because you wouldn't accept help. Gabriel stood, moved toward the door. Try to sleep. I'll be down the hall if you need anything. Gabriel, I said before he could leave. Thank you. For coming when I screamed. For listening. For giving a damn whether I'm okay beyond baseline survival. Nobody's done that since I was 19. Then everyone else was failing you. His silhouette paused in the doorway. Get some rest. Tomorrow I'm teaching you emergency protocols, and you'll need to be sharp. He left me alone in the darkness, and for the first time in 3 weeks, the isolation felt less like imprisonment and more like shelter. Gabriel was dangerous, morally complicated, connected to violence I'd spent years avoiding. But he was also genuinely trying to keep me alive, and that mattered more than all the reasons I should maintain careful distance. I wondered when protection had started feeling like partnership, when survival had started feeling like something worth pursuing beyond just avoiding death. The ring on my finger caught moonlight, simple gold band that represented far more complexity than I'd anticipated when I'd agreed to this arrangement. 3 weeks married to Gabriel Fioraldi, and I was starting to forget what isolation felt like. Starting to imagine futures that extended beyond immediate danger. Starting to trust someone in ways that made survival feel less lonely and infinitely more complicated. The video arrived on a Thursday morning while Gabriel was in his office handling business calls. I was working on a branding project in the living room when my encrypted phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown sender. The message contained a single video file. No text, no explanation. I should have waited for Gabriel. Should have called Vincent. Should have done literally anything except click play on a file from an unidentified source. But curiosity and the particular brand of stupid bravery that got me into this situation 8 years ago won out over caution. The video was grainy, shot from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed the front entrance of Gabriel's building, timestamp from 2 days ago, and there we were. Gabriel's hand at the small of my back, guiding me toward the car where Vincent waited. The footage was steady, professional, the work of someone with surveillance training. It played for 15 seconds before cutting to black text on white background. I know where you sleep, little witness. Protection means nothing when I'm patient. My hands shook, holding the phone. Victor wasn't just in Miami. He'd been outside the building, watching, recording, close enough to capture clear images through expensive camera equipment. All of Gabriel's security, all the protocols and armed guards and bulletproof windows. And Victor had still gotten within shooting distance. I walked to Gabriel's office on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Knocked once. Didn't wait for invitation before entering. He was on the phone speaking Italian, but took one look at my face and immediately switched to English. I'll call you back. He disconnected, rising from his desk. What happened? I handed him the phone without speaking, watched his expression shift from concern to cold fury as he watched the video, his jaw tightening with each second. When did you receive this? 2 minutes ago. Unknown number, untraceable probably. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. He was right there, Gabriel. 20 feet from your building entrance. How did security miss him? Because he's professionally trained in remaining invisible, and we were focused on different threat vectors. Gabriel replayed the video, studying the angle and quality. This was shot from the parking garage across the street, 4th or 5th level based on elevation. Somewhere security cameras have blind spots, so he found a weakness in your defenses. He found one angle in hundreds, doesn't mean he can exploit it for actual attack. But Gabriel's tone carried less certainty than his words. He forwarded the video to someone, typed rapid instructions I couldn't see. Vincent will review all footage from the past week, identify any other surveillance we missed. We're increasing protocols again, limiting your visibility further. I'm already barely leaving the apartment. How much more limited can we get? You don't leave at all until we locate Victor or confirm he's moved on. Gabriel set the phone down, moved around the desk to where I stood. I know that's not what you want to hear, but his message is clear. He's escalating, moving from distant threats to active surveillance. That means he's preparing for endgame. The clinical way he described my potential murder made me want to laugh or scream or both. So I'm trapped here indefinitely while he circles closer. You're protected here while we locate and neutralize the threat. Different framing, same reality. Gabriel's hand lifted like he wanted to touch my shoulder, then dropped. I won't let him get to you, Jessica. But I need you to cooperate with security even when it feels suffocating. Cooperate how? I already do everything Vincent tells me. I don't leave without escort. I barely exist outside these walls. Frustration I'd been suppressing for weeks bubbled over. I'm tired of being passive. tired of waiting for Victor to decide when and how he kills me. There has to be something I can do besides hide and hope your protection holds. You survived 8 years by being smart and cautious. Don't abandon that strategy now because frustration is making you reckless. I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm talking about being active instead of reactive. I grabbed my phone back, pulled up the video again. I know Victor. I watched him kill someone, sat through weeks of his trial, memorized his mannerisms and patterns because studying him was the only way to process what I'd witnessed. I know things about him that your security team doesn't. Gabriel studied me with that calculating expression I'd learned meant he was reassessing variables. What kind of things? Behavioral patterns. The way he prepares for operations, how he scouts locations, what tells he has when he's lying or stressed. I'd spent 8 years trying to forget those details, but they were carved into memory with the permanence of trauma. At his trial, investigators presented evidence I helped identify. Small things his defense attorney couldn't explain away because I'd noticed them in those 15 seconds in the alley. You're saying you want to help actively identify and locate him. I'm saying I should be part of the strategy instead of just the asset being protected. I've been studying predators for 8 years, learning to recognize threats before they materialize. Use that instead of keeping me locked away like fragile cargo. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing risk against potential benefit. If I agree, and that's a significant if, you follow my rules completely. No improvisation, no taking initiative beyond what's explicitly approved. Your insights contribute to strategy, but you don't engage directly. Understood? Understood. And if at any point I determine your involvement increases risk rather than reducing it, you withdraw without argument. Agreed. He moved back to his desk, pulled up files on his computer. Vincent compiled intelligence on Victor's movements over the past 4 weeks. Confirmed sightings, probable locations, associates he's contacted. If you're serious about helping, start reviewing these. Look for patterns, anything that stands out as inconsistent with his operational style. Over the next 3 hours, I absorbed everything Gabriel's people had gathered on Victor since his escape. Surveillance photos from 3 different cities. Financial transactions traced through shell accounts. Communications intercepted and decoded. Associates questioned and pressured. The sheer volume of resources dedicated to hunting one man was staggering, and still Victor had managed to kill 2 witnesses and reach Miami without being caught. But patterns emerged if you knew what to look for. Victor always scouted locations a minimum of 3 days before acting. He preferred working during shift changes when security attention was divided. He used local contractors for equipment and vehicles rather than maintaining his own assets that could be traced. And he had a specific tell, a way he tilted his head slightly to the right when evaluating risk, visible in several of the surveillance photos. He's not working alone, I said, when Gabriel returned with coffee for both of us. Here and here. I pointed to different photos. The positioning is wrong for solo surveillance. These are coordinated efforts, which means he's hired local support. Gabriel leaned over my shoulder, studying the images. Vincent thought the same thing but couldn't identify who. Can you? Not specifically, but I can tell you how he selects people. Victor prefers contractors with technical skills, but no personal connections to his targets. Low-level criminals with specialized knowledge, disposable if operations go wrong. I pulled up another photo. This one, the man in the parking garage. Watch how he's standing, weight on his left foot, right hand near his jacket pocket. That's the posture of someone carrying a weapon they're not completely comfortable with. Professional security wouldn't stand like that. So local hire. Probably someone Victor found through Miami's criminal networks. Gabriel typed notes. That's actionable intelligence. Vincent can pressure our own contacts, identify who's been approached for surveillance work recently. We worked through the evening, Gabriel making calls to people whose names he never mentioned, while I continued analyzing patterns in Victor's methodology. It felt good to be useful, to contribute something beyond passive compliance with security protocols. Felt like reclaiming agency I'd surrendered years ago when I'd entered protection. Around 9, Gabriel ordered dinner from a restaurant whose food arrived in containers too fancy for takeout. We ate at the dining table while continuing to review intelligence, the work creating an ease between us I hadn't felt before. This was partnership, collaboration towards shared goals, and the shift from protective arrangement to actual teamwork changed something fundamental in how I perceived Gabriel. "You're good at this," he observed, gesturing toward my notes. "Analysis, pattern recognition, threat assessment. You should have worked in intelligence instead of hiding behind a bar. Witness protection doesn't facilitate career counseling. They just tell you to stay invisible and hope nobody finds you." Apparently, whoever designed your protection strategy was an incompetent bureaucrat. You have skills that should have been utilized instead of suppressed. Gabriel refilled his wine glass, offered the bottle to me. "If we resolve this situation successfully, if Victor is captured or eliminated, you should consider actually using your capabilities." "Doing what? Consulting for organized crime families about security threats? If that interests you, sure. Or intelligence work, private security, risk assessment for legitimate corporations. You've spent 8 years developing survival instincts most people never acquire. That's marketable expertise." He paused. "Though architecture is still an option if that's what you actually want." The casual way he discussed my future, like survival past Victor was an achievable certainty rather than desperate hope, made something in my chest tighten unexpectedly. Gabriel spoke about afterwards like it was coming instead of if it was coming, and I'd started believing him despite all the reasons I should maintain skepticism. "Why do you care?" I asked. "About my future, my career, what happens after this arrangement ends? Most people in your position would be content with compliance and not worry about my long-term well-being. Because you're not most people. You're someone who made impossible choices at 19 and has spent 8 years paying the cost." Gabriel's expression was serious, almost tender. "And because somewhere in the past 4 weeks, you stopped being just a strategic asset and became someone I genuinely want to see survive and thrive." The admission hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us had been ready to examine before now. "I don't know what to do with that information," I said quietly. "Nothing required immediately. Just accept that your well-being matters to me beyond contractual obligation." He stood, began clearing plates with domestic ease that seemed incongruous with everything else about him. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led me to his office, pulled up different files on his computer. These weren't intelligence reports or surveillance photos. They were architectural plans, detailed blueprints for a building I didn't recognize. What am I looking at? A property I acquired 6 months ago. Current structure is outdated, needs complete renovation. I've been working with architects on redesign, but nothing they've proposed captures what the space could become. Gabriel pulled up another view, 3-dimensional rendering that showed potential but lacked vision. "You said you wanted to design spaces that change how people experience the world. Show me what you'd do with this." I stared at the screen, then at Gabriel, trying to understand what he was offering. "You're serious?" "Completely. This is legitimate development. Nothing connected to questionable business interests. If you're interested, I want your input. Not as obligation, but as genuine collaboration." He clicked through more images. "Take your time reviewing the plans. If something interests you, we'll discuss it." "Gabriel, I haven't designed anything real since I was 19. I wouldn't even know where to start." "You start by remembering what excited you about architecture before everything went to hell. Then you apply that to actual opportunity instead of theoretical fantasy." His voice carried conviction that made the offer feel less intimidating. "Consider it. No pressure, no timeline. Just possibility." I looked at the blueprints, at the space waiting to be transformed, at the future. Gabriel was casually offering like it was reasonable to plan beyond immediate survival. The gesture shouldn't have affected me as much as it did. This was still a strategic arrangement, still a marriage built on protection rather than affection. Except somewhere over 4 weeks, the lines had blurred. Gabriel wasn't just my protection anymore. He was becoming someone I trusted, someone whose approval I found myself seeking, someone whose presence made the isolation bearable. Dangerous territory for someone who'd survived 8 years by not forming attachments. Late that night, working at the dining table while Gabriel handled calls in his office, I realized I was designing, sketching ideas for the building he'd shown me, letting imagination override practical concerns about materials and budgets and building codes. It felt good, felt like reconnecting with a version of myself I'd thought was dead. Gabriel emerged around midnight, saw my sketches spread across the table, and studied them with genuine interest. These are remarkable. The way you've reconceived the entrance flow, how light moves through the central atrium. This is exactly the kind of vision I was looking for. He leaned closer, examining details. You're talented, Jessica. Genuinely talented. Not just competent. It's rough work. Probably not even structurally feasible. It's brilliant work that needs refinement, which is what architects do. Gabriel straightened, met my eyes. Thank you for showing me this. For trusting me with something you care about. The moment stretched, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. Gabriel stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, close enough to see exhaustion behind his controlled expression. He'd spent 4 weeks protecting me, managing threats, maintaining security that kept Victor at bay. The toll that took was written in subtle lines around his eyes, in the way he held tension in his shoulders. You should sleep, I said. You look exhausted. Probably. But there's always one more call, one more security check, one more potential threat to evaluate. He didn't move away, just remained in that charged space between us. Victor's video today was deliberate escalation. He's preparing for his move, which means we're running out of time to locate him first. Are we going to find him before he finds another opening in your defenses? Yes, because failure isn't acceptable. Gabriel's hand lifted, thumb brushing my cheek so briefly I might have imagined it. I meant what I said earlier. You matter to me, Jessica. Not as obligation or asset, but as person I've come to care about. That's probably inappropriate given our arrangement's origins, but it's true nonetheless. My breath caught. Gabriel, I know. Complicated timing, questionable circumstances, all the reasons this is a terrible idea to acknowledge. His hand dropped away, but I wanted you to know anyway. So when Victor is caught, and we negotiate what comes next, you understand that continuing this arrangement would be my preference. Before I could formulate a response, his phone buzzed. He checked it, expression darkening. Vincent found something. I need to deal with this immediately. He was already moving toward his office. We'll continue this conversation later. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with architectural sketches and the echo of his admission. Gabriel cared about me, wanted to continue our marriage past the point where protection was necessary. Had transformed from stranger to someone whose future I'd started imagining alongside my own. I touched my cheek where his thumb had brushed, wondering when survival had become so thoroughly entangled with emotion I'd spent years suppressing, when safety had started feeling like something more complicated than just protection from external threats. The ring on my finger caught light from the dining room chandelier. 4 weeks married to Gabriel Fioraldi, and I was starting to forget where strategic arrangement ended and actual feelings began, starting to imagine futures that extended beyond capturing Victor, starting to want something I'd convinced myself wasn't available to someone who'd been running for 8 years. I gathered my sketches carefully, storing them in the portfolio Gabriel had provided. Tomorrow I'd refine the designs, research structural feasibility, maybe even consult with actual architects about turning concepts into buildable plans. Tomorrow I'd continue helping identify patterns in Victor's behavior that might lead to his capture. But tonight, I let myself acknowledge what I'd been denying for weeks. I was falling for Gabriel Fioraldi, complicated criminal connections and all. Falling for the man who'd married me to keep me alive, who taught me threat assessment at 3 a.m, who offered architectural projects like they were reasonable gifts instead of impossible dreams. And when Victor was finally caught, when the immediate danger passed, I was going to have to decide whether that was something worth pursuing or just trauma bonding disguised as authentic connection. Problem for another day. Tonight, I had designs to refine, and a husband whose admission had changed everything about how I understood our arrangement. The future could wait until survival became guaranteed, instead of provisional. Vincent's intelligence breakthrough came 3 days after the video. Gabriel emerged from his office at 7 a.m. looking like he'd been awake all night, which he probably had. I was making coffee when he appeared, exhaustion written across his features beneath the controlled focus he maintained even when running on fumes. We found him, he said without preamble. Victor. Vincent tracked one of his local contractors to a network of associates, pressured the right people, got confirmation that Victor is operating out of a warehouse in Doral. We have the location, floor plans, surveillance indicating he's still there. I set down the coffee mug before I could drop it. You're sure? As sure as we can be without direct visual confirmation. Vincent is coordinating with people I trust to verify before we move. Gabriel accepted the coffee I'd poured, drank half of it in one swallow. There's a charity event Saturday night at the Fontainebleau. High profile, heavily attended, exactly the kind of public venue where Victor might try to make contact if he thinks there's an opportunity. You want to use me as bait. I want to draw him out in a controlled environment where we have overwhelming tactical advantage. You attend the event with me, visible and seemingly vulnerable, while my entire security apparatus positions to identify and intercept anyone connected to Victor. Gabriel's voice carried the clinical precision of someone who'd planned this scenario extensively. The goal is forcing him to commit resources, to expose his network so we can trace back to his location, and coordinate proper law enforcement response. Proper law enforcement. You mean the FBI contacts you trust not to have leaks? Exactly. Once we confirm Victor's location and have intelligence on his support structure, I hand everything to federal agents who weren't compromised by whoever leaked witness information originally. He set down his empty mug. But the Fontainebleau operation requires your active participation. You'd be visible, serving as catalyst to force Victor's hand. That involves calculated risk. What kind of risk? Minimal if everything proceeds according to plan. Vincent's team will be positioned throughout the venue. I'll be beside you the entire evening, and we'll have secondary layers of security Victor won't be able to identify. But visibility means exposure, even controlled exposure. I need you to understand what I'm asking before agreeing. I thought about 8 years of hiding, of being passive while others determined my safety. Thought about the architectural sketches currently spread across my desk, about Gabriel's admission that I mattered to him beyond strategic necessity. Thought about the alternative, which was remaining locked away while Victor circled closer. I'll do it, but I want full details of the security plan, not just vague reassurances. If I'm the catalyst, I need to understand exactly what that means operationally. Gabriel's expression shifted, something that might have been relief or approval. Fair requirement. This afternoon, Vincent will brief you on complete security protocols. You'll learn communication systems, evacuation routes, threat response procedures. By Saturday, you'll be as prepared as possible for every contingency we've anticipated. Over the next 2 days, my crash course in active security operations consumed every waking hour. Vincent walked me through the Fontainebleau's layout until I could navigate it blindfolded. Floor plans, emergency exits, sightlines, defensive positions. He taught me hand signals for communicating with security without obvious gestures. Showed me how to wear the small earpiece that would keep me connected to the team throughout the evening. Your job is simple, Vincent explained during one session. Be visible, maintain composure, watch for anyone matching Victor's profile or known associates. You identify potential threats, we verify and respond. You don't engage directly under any circumstances. What if something goes wrong? If Victor gets past your perimeter? Then you follow the evacuation protocol we're drilling until you can execute it reflexively. Trust the training, trust the team, trust Mr. Fioraldi. Vincent's expression was serious. He's never lost anyone under his protection. Saturday won't be the first time. Gabriel appeared less frequently during those 2 days, coordinating aspects of the operation I wasn't privy to. When we did cross paths, he'd check on my training progress with Vincent, ensure I was handling the pressure, occasionally touch my shoulder or hand with brief reassurance that felt more personal than professional. Late Friday night, he found me reviewing floor plans one more time in the living room. Sat down beside me without asking, close enough that our shoulders touched. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. If the risk feels too substantial, we'll find another approach. Your safety matters more than expedient resolution. I need to do this. Need to stop being passive. Stop letting Victor control the narrative of my life. I set down the floor plans, turned to face him. 8 years I've been running. I'm tired of running, Gabriel. I want to turn around and fight. Fighting and being smart aren't mutually exclusive. You can be brave without being reckless. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together with startling intimacy. I'm asking you to trust me tomorrow night. Trust that I won't let him get to you, that the security we've built is sufficient, that this plan works. I do trust you. That terrifies me almost as much as Victor does. But it's true. I squeezed his hand. When did that happen? When did you stop being the stranger I married out of desperation and become someone I'd trust with my life? Probably around the same time you stopped being an obligation and became someone I can't imagine not protecting. Gabriel's thumb traced patterns on my palm. After Saturday, after Victor is neutralized, we should discuss what this arrangement becomes. Because I don't want to stop being your husband, Jessica. That's not strategic calculation. That's genuine preference. The admission should have felt premature, complicated by circumstance and trauma bonding. Instead, it settled warm and certain in my chest, confirmation of what I'd been feeling, but hadn't articulated. I don't want to stop either, I admitted, which is probably the worst possible timing for this conversation. But there it is. Gabriel leaned closer, his free hand cupping my jaw with careful intent. Terrible timing. Absolutely inadvisable given everything happening tomorrow. But I'm going to kiss you anyway. Because I've wanted to for 3 weeks. And uncertainty about whether we survive Victor's next move makes waiting seem pointless. That's fatalistic reasoning. That's honest reasoning. His mouth hovered inches from mine. Tell me to stop if this isn't what you want. I closed the remaining distance instead of answering with words. The kiss was nothing like the brief, chaste contact at our courthouse wedding. This was hungry and desperate. Weeks of tension and proximity, and carefully maintained distance collapsing into urgent need. Gabriel's hand tightened in my hair, pulling me closer while his other arm wrapped around my waist, like he could physically shield me from everything threatening us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. That complicates things. I managed. That clarifies things. Everything else was complicated. This is the only simple truth in a situation built on strategic necessity. Gabriel pulled back slightly, studying my face with an intensity that made me feel seen in ways I'd avoided for years. Stay with me tonight. Not for strategy or security protocols, just because I don't want to spend what might be our last quiet night apart. That's still fatalistic. That's still honest. He stood, extended his hand. Your choice, Jessica. No pressure, no expectations beyond proximity. I took his hand, let him lead me to his bedroom that I'd never entered before. The space was surprisingly simple, elegant but understated. King-sized bed with navy linens, minimal furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering the same bay views as the rest of the apartment. Personal, but not revealing, controlled even in private space. We didn't sleep together in any sense beyond literal proximity. Gabriel simply held me, both of us fully clothed on top of the covers, his arms solid shelter against every fear I'd been carrying. We talked about meaningless things, carefully avoiding discussion of tomorrow's operation or Victor's threat. He told me about his mother in Naples, about the bakery she'd owned before his father swept her to America with promises of better life. I told him about architecture professors I'd loved, about the buildings I'd studied before Chicago shattered everything. Somewhere near dawn, I fell asleep wrapped in his warmth, feeling safer than I had in 8 years. When I woke, he was already dressed in a suit, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Time to prepare, he said gently. Vincent will be here in an hour with your dress. Eat something, run through protocols one more time. Then we transform you into someone attending charity events instead of hiding from assassins. The dress Vincent delivered was stunning. Deep red wine color that Gabriel had specifically chosen. Fitted bodice that emphasized what curves I had before flowing into an elegant skirt that moved like water. Nothing overtly sexual, but definitely attention-catching. The kind of dress that announced presence without screaming for notice. Hair and makeup were handled by professionals who arrived at 4, transforming me from bartender hiding behind anonymity into someone who could plausibly attend events where Miami's wealthy congregated. Elegant updo that showed off my neck and the small scar on my eyebrow that no amount of makeup quite concealed. Understated jewelry except for my wedding ring, which caught light with every movement. When I emerged from my bedroom at 7, Gabriel was waiting in the living room. He'd chosen a perfectly tailored black tux that made him look dangerous and sophisticated simultaneously. His expression when he saw me was worth every uncomfortable moment of preparation. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Stunning in a way that's going to make maintaining professional distance extremely difficult. "Then don't maintain distance. We're supposed to look like an actual couple, right? Might as well make it convincing." I crossed to where he stood, straightened his already perfect bow tie just to have an excuse to touch him. "How are you feeling about tonight? Confident in the security? Concerned about variables I can't control? Determined to end this so we can start actually living instead of just surviving?" He caught my hands, held them between us. "Whatever happens tonight, you follow Vincent's instructions exactly. If he says evacuate, you evacuate. If he says hide, you hide. No improvisation, no heroics. Understood? Understood. I trust you, Gabriel. All of you. The security you've built. The plan you've designed. I trust that this works. It will work, because failure means losing you. And that's not acceptable." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, lingering like he was memorizing the moment. "Ready? As ready as I'll ever be for using myself as bait to catch the man who's wanted me dead for 8 years. I managed what I hoped was a confident smile. "Let's go end this." The drive to the Fontainebleau was silent. Gabriel beside me in the back of the SUV, while Vincent drove with focused intensity. I could see the security team in a vehicle ahead of us, another behind, the coordinated movement of professionals executing practiced protocol. The hotel was exactly as impressive as its reputation suggested. Art Deco magnificence, soaring ceilings, the kind of old Miami glamour that attracted celebrities and politicians. We entered through the main ballroom entrance at exactly 8 o'clock, Gabriel's hand at the small of my back, projecting the image of wealthy couple attending charitable obligations. The ballroom was already crowded, several hundred people in evening wear mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. I spotted Vincent at the bar within seconds, then systematically located the other security team members positioned throughout the space, exactly where floor plans had indicated. Everything according to plan, everyone in position. Gabriel guided me to our assigned table near the ballroom's center, optimal sightlines in every direction. We made small talk with the other couples sharing the space, Gabriel introducing me as his wife with possessive warmth that felt increasingly genuine. I smiled, played the role of supportive spouse, and systematically scanned the crowd for any face that matched Victor's profile or known associates. 2 hours into the event during dinner service, I saw him. Not Victor himself, but a man whose positioning was wrong. Mid-40s, nondescript features, standing near the north entrance with sightlines to our table. His stance was too alert, his attention too focused on us rather than the event. And the way he held his head, slight tilt to evaluate risk, matched patterns I'd studied in surveillance photos. I adjusted my bracelet twice, the signal Vincent had taught me. Within 30 seconds, I felt Gabriel's hand tighten on mine under the table. "Confirmed," came Vincent's voice through my nearly invisible earpiece. "North entrance, gray suit. We're tracking him. Stay calm. Maintain normal behavior." The man remained at his position for another 10 minutes before moving toward the exit. I watched Vincent signal to other team members, saw them follow at discreet distances. The coordination was flawless, invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. "He's leaving," Gabriel murmured against my ear, the gesture looking like intimate whisper to anyone observing. "Vincent's team will follow, trace back to wherever Victor is operating from. You did perfectly, Jessica." But something felt wrong. The man had been too obvious, too easy to spot for someone working with Victor's level of professional caution. Like he'd wanted to be noticed, wanted to draw attention and resources away from something else. "Gabriel," I said quietly, urgency making my voice sharp. That was too easy. Victor wouldn't send someone that obvious unless it was deliberate misdirection. His expression shifted immediately, understanding dawning. He touched his earpiece, spoke rapidly in Italian, then stood with smooth urgency that didn't quite hide alarm. "We're leaving. Now." "Vincent thinks you're right." That was a decoy to pull security focus. Gabriel's hand on my elbow was firm, guiding me toward the nearest exit with practiced efficiency. "Stay close. Follow my lead exactly." We moved through the crowd with purpose that probably looked like early departure to casual observers. Vincent materialized beside us, 2 other team members flanking our movement. The coordination was seamless, professional, exactly the security Gabriel had promised. We'd almost reached the exit when I saw the second man, standing near the valet station, watching our approach with patient certainty. Older than the decoy, weathered features that matched descriptions I'd memorized 8 years ago, a thin scar on his neck, barely visible above his collar. Viktor Volkov in person, 20 feet away in closing distance with the confident stride of someone who'd planned this moment thoroughly. Gabriel, I breathed, terror and strange triumph warring in my chest. That's him. That's Viktor. Everything happened simultaneously in fragmented seconds that felt like hours. Vincent's hand on my arm pulling me back toward the ballroom interior. Gabriel positioning himself between Viktor and me with the instinctive protection that had defined our entire arrangement. Security team members converging from multiple directions. Coordinated movement that was beautiful in its lethal precision. Viktor saw them coming. Of course he did. 8 years planning this moment meant he'd anticipated security response, planned for complications, prepared contingencies for scenarios where direct approach failed. His hand moved toward his jacket, and Vincent shoved me sideways hard enough that I stumbled into a decorative column. But no gunshot came. Because this was the Fontainebleau, crawling with private security and off-duty police working event protection. Viktor shooting me would achieve the goal of my death while guaranteeing his immediate capture or death, not the escape he'd planned. Instead, he smiled. The same smile I remembered from the alley 8 years ago. Recognition and patient certainty that this wasn't over. Then he turned and walked calmly toward the exit, like he'd simply changed his mind about valet service. Don't lose him, Gabriel said into his radio, voice carrying absolute authority. Follow at distance, identify his vehicle and support team, but do not engage publicly. We trace him back to his base of operations and coordinate proper law enforcement response. Vincent signaled to 3 team members who immediately peeled off, following Viktor's retreat with professional discretion. Gabriel turned to me, hands framing my face, checking for injury with urgent intensity. Are you hurt? Did you hit anything when Vincent moved you? I'm fine. Bruised probably, but fine. My heart was racing so fast I felt lightheaded, adrenaline making everything too bright and too sharp. That was him. That was really him, Gabriel. After 8 years, I was 20 feet from Viktor Volkov, and you identified him before he could get close enough to be a genuine threat. Your pattern recognition just saved your life. Gabriel's thumb brushed my cheekbone. We need to leave immediately. Vincent's team will track Viktor, but you need to be somewhere with fortress-level security until we confirm what his next move is. The drive back to the apartment passed in tense silence. Gabriel on the phone speaking rapid Italian to people coordinating Viktor's surveillance. I sat pressed against his side, needing the solid warmth of him to process what had just happened. Viktor had been right there, close enough that I'd seen the scar on his neck, the patient calculation in his eyes. Close enough to kill me if circumstances had been different. But circumstances hadn't been different. Gabriel's security had worked exactly as designed, identifying the threat and responding before Viktor could act. The trap we'd set had partially succeeded, drawing Viktor out and confirming his presence even if we hadn't captured him directly. Back at the apartment, Gabriel's office became command center. Vincent appeared within minutes with laptop and encrypted communications equipment, coordinating with the team following Viktor's movements through Miami's streets. Gabriel paced behind his desk, tie loosened and jacket discarded, looking more dangerous than I'd ever seen him. Talk to me, Vincent. Where is he? Heading north on I-95, 2 vehicles trailing at safe distance. Looks like he's going toward the warehouse location in Doral we identified earlier. Vincent typed rapidly, pulling up maps and real-time tracking data. We've got eyes on his support vehicle, 2 other men besides Viktor. Once he reaches his base, we can coordinate tactical response. FBI or local? FBI. Agent Martinez, the contact you vetted. She's clean? Wasn't part of the original witness protection breach. Vincent glanced at me, then back to Gabriel. She can have a team assembled within the hour, ready to move once we confirm Viktor is stationary. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, calculating risk and timing. Set it up. Full coordination with Martinez, but our people maintain overwatch until federal agents are on scene. I want confirmation that Victor is contained before standing down security. Over the next 90 minutes, I watched Gabriel orchestrate law enforcement response with the casual competence of someone who'd done this before, coordinating between his security team and FBI resources, ensuring everyone understood objectives and rules of engagement, maintaining control of an operation that was technically outside his authority, but practically dependent on his intelligence and assets. Agent Martinez arrived at the apartment around midnight, crisp and professional despite the late hour. Mid-40s with sharp eyes and the efficient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades in federal service. She reviewed the intelligence Gabriel's team had compiled, asked pointed questions about surveillance methods and source reliability, then made a series of calls that assembled tactical response faster than I'd thought possible. "Your information is solid," she told Gabriel. "We've had people looking for Volkov since his escape, and you found him in 3 weeks. That's impressive work. I had personal motivation and resources federal bureaucracy doesn't facilitate." Gabriel's expression was carefully neutral. "What's your timeline for moving on the warehouse?" 2 hours. I want full tactical team assembled, helicopter support in position, every exit covered before we announce our presence." Martinez looked at me directly. "Ms. Turner, I'll need your statement after we secure Volkov. Everything you witnessed tonight, anything he said or did that could support charges beyond the original conviction." He didn't say anything, just smiled and walked away when he realized security had him surrounded. I pulled my wrap tighter, suddenly cold despite the apartment's comfortable temperature. "But I can provide detailed identification, confirm it was definitely him at the Fontainebleau. That helps. Visual confirmation from the primary witness will strengthen our case." Martinez closed her laptop with decisive finality. "Mr. Fioraldi, your team should stand down once our tactical unit is in position. We appreciate the intelligence, but FBI will handle the actual arrest." "Understood. My people will withdraw to perimeter observation once you signal tactical is ready." Gabriel's tone was professionally cooperative, but I heard the tension underneath. He was surrendering control of an operation that directly affected my safety, trusting federal agents to finish what his resources had started. After Martinez left, Gabriel returned to his office while Vincent coordinated final details with the team maintaining surveillance on Victor's warehouse location. I sat in the living room feeling disconnected from my body, watching Miami's lights through bulletproof windows and processing that this might actually be ending. 8 years of running, 4 weeks of strategic marriage, and tonight might be the night I stopped having to look over my shoulder. Gabriel found me there around 2 a.m, dropping onto the couch beside me with exhaustion written across his features. "Martinez's team is moving into position. Should have confirmation within the hour that Victor is in custody." He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. Too much adrenaline still. Too much disbelief that this might actually be over." I leaned against his shoulder. "What happens after? When Victor is captured and the immediate threat ends?" "We've discussed this. We negotiate what our marriage becomes going forward." Gabriel's arm wrapped around me, pulling me closer. "I meant what I said last night. I don't want this to end, Jessica. The circumstances that brought us together were complicated, but what's developed between us feels genuine. It is genuine. That's what terrifies me." I tilted my head to look at him. "Your world, your family connections, the business interests that aren't entirely legal. I've spent 8 years hiding from organized crime, and now I'm married into it. How do we make that sustainable? By being honest about the complications and choosing each other anyway. I can't change my family, can't erase connections that were built before I was born. But I can maintain distance from operations that would make you uncomfortable, can focus on legitimate business interests, can build a life that isn't defined by my father's choices." His voice was serious, carrying conviction. "If you want this to continue, I'll make it work. That's not empty promise, that's commitment." Before I could respond, Vincent appeared in the doorway. "Martinez just signaled. Tactical team is entering the warehouse now. Should have confirmation shortly." We moved to Gabriel's office, watching real-time updates as FBI agents executed their operation. The warehouse was exactly where Vincent's intelligence had indicated, Victor and 2 associates inside, surrounded by evidence of extensive planning. Weapons, surveillance equipment, files on multiple targets including detailed information about me. The arrest was clean and professional. Victor didn't resist, didn't try to fight or escape. He simply raised his hands when federal agents announced their presence, accepting capture with the same patient certainty he'd shown at the Fontainebleau. Like this was a setback rather than defeat. Temporary interruption instead of conclusion. Martinez called 15 minutes later. "We have him. Volkov is in custody, being transported to federal holding facility. His associates are cooperating, providing information about his network and support structure. I'll need Ms. Turner's statement tomorrow, but the immediate threat is neutralized." Gabriel thanked her, disconnected, and turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Relief, certainly, but also something more complicated. "It's over," he said. "Victor is in federal custody, and this time the people holding him aren't compromised. You're safe, Jessica. Actually safe." The words should have brought overwhelming relief. Instead, I felt oddly hollow, like 8 years of constant vigilance had carved out space inside me that safety couldn't immediately fill. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Now we figure out how to be married without the immediate threat forcing the arrangement." Gabriel pulled me against him, holding tight. "Now we decide if what we've built over 4 weeks is sustainable without fear driving every decision." We spent the rest of the night curled together on his office couch, not sleeping, just existing in the strange liminal space between survival and whatever came next. Vincent updated us periodically on Victor's processing, confirming that federal agents were taking extraordinary precautions to prevent another escape. Agent Martinez called again around dawn to schedule my official statement, professional and thorough in ways that suggested she took witness protection failures personally. When morning light finally painted the windows gold and pink, Gabriel kissed my forehead with tender certainty. "I'm offering you a choice now that survival isn't forcing your hand. Stay married to me because you want to, because what we've built matters beyond strategic necessity. Or we pursue annulment, and I help you establish a genuinely safe life wherever you want to be." His voice was steady, offering genuine options without pressure. "Either way, you're protected. Either way, I'll make sure you have the resources to build whatever life you want, but I need you to choose freely, instead of choosing out of fear." I thought about the past 4 weeks, about architectural sketches and shared coffee mornings, and Gabriel teaching me threat assessment at 3 a.m, about his patient certainty that I deserved better than hiding, his commitment to protecting me even when easier options existed, about falling for him despite every reason I should maintain careful distance. "I choose you," I said, "not because you're the safe option, but because you've become the person I can't imagine navigating life without. Not just surviving with, but actually living with." I caught his face between my hands. "I love you, Gabriel. That's probably too fast and too complicated and too entangled with trauma bonding, but it's true." His expression transformed, something fierce and tender simultaneously. "I love you too. Have loved you since approximately week 2, when you argued with me about security protocols and then cooked dinner using my grandmother's recipe like you belonged here. He kissed me properly, thoroughly. Nothing strategic or restrained about it. We'll figure out the complications, negotiate boundaries between my family obligations and your comfort. But we'll do it together instead of you facing it alone." 6 months later, I stood in the architectural offices I'd opened with Gabriel's backing, reviewing plans for our 3rd major project. The renovation we'd designed for his building had been completed 2 months prior, garnering attention from developers who wanted similar vision applied to their properties. My degree program was progressing, actual professors reviewing my work instead of online tutorials. Legitimate credentials slowly replacing the false identity I'd carried for 8 years. Gabriel was transitioning operations control of his father's less savory interests to trusted associates, maintaining enough connection to avoid family conflict while distancing himself from activities that made me uncomfortable. Not a complete exit, because that was unrealistic, but deliberate movement toward primarily legitimate business operations. It was compromise, negotiation, the kind of complicated balance that real relationships required. We renewed our vows on a Saturday morning, private ceremony at the same courthouse where we'd married out of desperation 4 weeks after meeting, this time with my real name, Jessica Turner, formally becoming Jessica Fioraldi, through choice instead of necessity. Vincent served as witness again, along with Agent Martinez, who'd become an unlikely friend through the aftermath of Victor's arrest. Victor himself remained in maximum security federal prison, charges from his escape and subsequent murders ensuring he'd never walk free again. Occasionally I'd see news coverage about his appeals or legal maneuvers, but the fear that used to accompany his name had faded. He was just a man who'd made terrible choices, not the monster who'd controlled 8 years of my life. That evening, standing in our apartment watching sunset paint Biscayne Bay in golds and purples, Gabriel wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About marrying you?" "None." I leaned into his warmth. "About how we got here?" "Some. But I think the destination justifies the complicated journey. Philosophy major in another life? Architecture student with pretentious tendencies." I turned in his arms, studying the face I'd learned to read over 7 months. "Thank you for protecting me when I needed it, for giving me space to choose freely when I didn't, for building a life where I can actually thrive instead of just survive. Thank you for trusting me, despite every reasonable instinct suggesting you shouldn't." He kissed me gently. "And for designing spaces that change how people experience the world. Your buildings are remarkable, Jessica. Our buildings. You funded them. Believed in them when they were just sketches on paper. Our buildings," he agreed. "Our life, our future, our choice. That sounds exactly right." We stood there as Miami's lights began illuminating the darkness. Two people who'd found each other through the worst possible circumstances and chosen to build something genuine from strategic necessity. It wasn't a perfect ending, because real life doesn't provide those. But it was real, and chosen, and ours. And after 8 years of running, real and chosen, and ours was more than enough. The end.